have good space and time to tune in. Got it. Welcome. Give it to Pi straight away.
Okay, hi everyone. So today is basically when we begin. The last call was more introductory, and yeah, it's really a slowing down experience, isn't it? To start to look at all of these really deep and interesting things. Each call is a possible moment where we can look at the parts. We are really good at looking at the whole thing. And it takes a certain discipline, I think, to start to look at one by one, almost in sequence, what in the energy process happens all at the same time. Yeah. At the same time, though, when we look at each part, we would have to look at the many parts that are connected to that one part. And there's a certain style, there's a certain way in which you begin to speak from an inner dance space. When you hold a room together, that would put you in such a situation, you know, like always people have quite a challenge with that event in which, okay, how do I explain this? How do I put this into words? How do I contextualize this in people's minds when this is still something of a mystery? This is something that's not ever going to be easy to put into words. So when the words do come, the words are almost merely an energy that is locating itself, finding its own space. In this way, using sounds and images along with words really help. So what I used to do in the trainings since the beginning was I would hold like big pieces of paper, big cardboard, big illustration boards, and then I'd have these different colored pens. And it helped to put those images there in a sense to contain the sound. You know, there's this song, I don't know if you know it. I think it was by Don McLean, or no, it's by Bread, a group called Bread. And it goes like, a picture paints 1,000 words. In a way, a sound probably paints 1,000 pictures. And all of these are painting or sounding out a whole lot of other sensory modalities. So when we are able to work with the image, we're able to encapsulate sound, and more, even in these online processes, using images seem quite important. They have organizational capacities, especially when we work with something like inner dance. Like there's so much of the music and the sound in the process, and we want to be able to work with the images that appear from inside the imaginative field, the symbolic field. Also the images that are shareable within the collective space. So I want to do a presentation today. I've not done a Prezi ever, actually. And I'm wanting to do it within a Zoom space just to help me organize my own mind as I tune into your mind. I think in that space of taking things slowly, one at a time, it's really important that we end up sharing not the same, but a conventional language. What are the terms that we would use that begin to harmonize a, a set of understandings? The intuitive understanding can be quite flowing, can be quite spacey, it can be quite personal. So it's really up to you how you would like to stream through your spiritual frameworks. And a lot of that is coming up in the world now. It's quite vast, it's quite varied. When we start going into the structural language, that's where some of the sciences and philosophies come in. And that's something that we can share together, because there's something about these frameworks that aren't so fluid. We could relate to these in a way that's like peer-to-peer, meaning these presenting certain epistemological knowledge constructs that have been looked at in scientific ways means there was a method, there was a method of arriving at theory that came up, where whenever someone comes up with a knowledge claim, it was compared with everything that was known around any of these concepts, so that it's not just going to be based on like I think or I feel at this moment that this could be true. I do feel that within the sciences, there are spiritual elements that are coming up, and when we start to absorb and immerse in those ourselves, it does something to us. It's almost like we're like shifting into that world space that might have seemed rigid before, but in a way we start to bring fluidity through our spiritual way of seeing things. There are often like unexpected connections and amazing possible synchronicities that may not be available in conservative science, controlled science. So I think there are new sciences that are coming through the world that are being lent by the spiritual process. So if you could allow me to speak about some of those today, then these are things that we could talk about. Let's keep this conversational. In the beginning, I will do a presentation. Maybe it could be an hour, a bit more than an hour, and then afterwards we could go into a dialogue. I think I need to press certain buttons in my computer. Okay. So my GoPro isn't working at the moment, so now I'm behind the thing. Okay, maybe I should sit here. Okay, so I guess, wait, can you see the Prezi? Could someone sound out yes or no?
Yes.
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 Wonderful, thank you. So why does it happen? How? I think this is something we should ask. Like, what is it in the energy that makes it happen the way it does? Why does the body move like that? Why do we go into those journey spaces? Like what, why, how? We can keep asking that, and there are so many different answers that would always come up. So I think the starting point is there's something about the body, that knows something. And then it's the mind that has to catch up with that step by step. It's interesting, isn't it? It's like the body's doing something. It could be an emotion, it could be a movement, it could be these things people describe as spasms, electrical shocks, mudras, yogic positions. And it's almost like there's this schizophrenia where there's two of you. The body is doing something, and it seems like, when you're in a dream, it's like you know it when you're there. And then when you're not there anymore, it becomes a kind of memory. The same as in the inner dance. When you're there, the body knows it. And it doesn't have to be just a body motion. It could be like an image comes up. It could be something as simple as like a flower or the color blue. And when you're looking at it, there is sometimes a deep knowing of what it is. And that deep knowing is coming from this other space. And you can't just call it a body space. There's still a mentality there. There's still an aspect or a vibration of your mind there. And then there's this other space that doesn't know, that takes time to catch up. And sometimes it's in the sharing after the session, or it's in the weeks, the events in the weeks taking place later, where the pieces start to come together. The puzzle starts to become more clear. So I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of people dive into this even without knowing so much about it. It's because there is still a kind of knowing, and it's something about the body knowing something. So we're going to be talking about the body a lot, not just in these 3 months. Like there's something about the body that hasn't been looked at and hasn't been understood. Like, what is the body? We almost need to go into a phenomenological bracketing, which is a kind of knowing where you're pretending that you don't know anything about something, about anything. Let's say about food, about sleep, about money, about relationships. When you go into phenomenological bracketing, it's like you create the space for knowing more by pretending that you don't know anything about that one thing. So to bracket our knowing of the body is to open ourselves up to what does the body know, and what is a different way of knowing the body. Is the body really just base? Is it just that physical thing? Is it reducible, deterministic? Is it like material? And so I think our generation is being exposed to another understanding of the body. It's like the body is the universe, the body is the earth, the body is vibration. So we're beginning to listen to that, and there are a lot of these different modalities, these sensoriums emerging in the world that's building practice elements so that we could learn more about a mind that's in the body, a spirit or a consciousness that's in the body. There's so much deeper, bigger, more profound than we might have realized. And somehow movement has something to do with it. We're finding out more and more, even in the sciences, that the movement actually precedes thought. This is why I shared the seasons playlist. The conversation with Ash features this one insight. Movement seems to facilitate thought. And so even in the psychologies and in the neurosciences, there's an understanding that the original ways we began to move the body in fact helped us to arrive at the conceptualization, the thinking mode. For us to learn how to think, to conceptualize it, the process actually began with the movement. It has something to do with taking in the space. When the baby does that, when the toddler does that, we're aware of like so many things through the multiple senses. And it's the movements that allow us to build a relationship with that whole space. It doesn't have to be just the house, the room, the garden. It could be like the earth or the universe is filled with all of these ideas and information. So when movement is taken away from us, we actually lose our capacities to think well. So when we grow up in these family systems and these academic situations where we're asked to stop moving, and now there are certain cultures and certain institutions that are realizing like children should play, children should move around, and we're not children, but we're becoming childlike. So things like innerdance are helping us to go back to the origins of the mind, which is movement itself. And that alone makes so much sense. It's like, it's not just the body, the origins of the body actually has something to do with the dance. So reclaiming your dance, reclaiming your movements actually helps you to reclaim your mind. So don't give in to the temptation of like canceling out the mind. You read it a lot in spiritual texts and in conversation. The mind is not good. The mind is poisonous. The mind doesn't work. You need to shut down the mind. The mind and the body are in a way becoming one, and it's the dance that will help to bridge and to heal the separation between the two, so that the mind isn't just the mind as we normally define it. It's consciousness. It's the universe becoming aware of itself. And when that happens, I think the body becomes the universe that is the consciousness. So what is it about the body? Okay, wait, I need to do a full screen here. Oh, it's not showing the whole thing. Okay, can you see the whole screen? Like the bubbles at the bottom? Can you see the text there?
No, the bubbles at the bottom are only half visible.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm seeing as well. Yeah, I was tinkering with this app like in the last minute and I had to do like a screen share option just to make it work. I think that's okay. Let's make do. At the bottom.
Bubble is in front of your face.
The what? Ah, yeah, it is. Yeah, that too shouldn't be. Let me just remove the face. Okay. At the bottom it says, what is time? And then the other bubble says, energy moves how? So I think it's about time. We're gonna go into the concept of the time giver. What is time? And to arrive at the answer to that question, we have to understand time is in the body. In general philosophy in the West, time is a concept. Time is something that exists outside of us. But we are starting to understand, no, time is a perception. There's a science called time perception. And within that, we're realizing time is embodied. When you alter certain conditions in the body, time shifts. Time could slow down, time could speed up. It's like you could maybe drink something. It could be beer or it could be coffee, or you could change the sound happening in the room, which is something we're experiencing in inner dance. Someone might say something, or you might see an image, It could be something horrific. It could be something amazing and beautiful. That time would shift. You either slow down time or you speed it up. So we need to respect that time is in the body somehow. It's an interesting mystery, and to look at it from like a short or small view, yeah, it slows down or speeds up in the moment, but time also has some kind of rhythmicity. It has seasonality. So entrainment is an important science right now. Entrainment is normally something we relate to the brain. Brainwave entrainment is a science that studies how external external influences influence our internal systems, and entrainment in terms of time syncs our clocks. So it could be related to temperature or climate, could be related to the movements of the sun and the moon. We have some clock running, and that could be measured by personal time or earth time or cultural time, societal time. These things are interesting. These things are important because these are the elements that are tapped into the inner dance. This is something we're not just mimicking or echoing, we're actually transforming embodied time. The time in the body is shifting really fast, and the moment we learn how to use cell phones and use the internet and started to watch television, use radio, all of these mediums are shifting us into different time perception. So when we speak about dimensionality, this is more or less what we're speaking about, where time starts to go weird. I'm sure you've been noticing it. Like time in a day isn't the same right now as it used to be maybe even a year ago or 10 years ago. I'm sure you have a sense of how time seemed to be when you were young. How is time different now? And then take your mind way farther back into deep time, into deep history. Was time the same to the cavemen? No, not the cave people, cavemen, cave women. What did time look like 5,000 years ago with the advent of written language or trade or civilization in the modern sense? What did time look like when we started to, every time we changed our modalities of language, of thought, that time's actually going through a shift. So I find this interesting that consciousness actually has a story. I'm slowing down before I say history because I don't like that term. There should also be a herstory. But it's almost like consciousness also has a herstory, a history or herstory, which means that vibrationally or dimensionally, the world didn't look the same. So to empathize with that, okay, look at that from an evolutionary perspective. What did time look like 5,000 years ago as a human? What did time look like when you were a chimpanzee or a bonobo or a monkey? What did time look like when you were a cow or a dog or a dinosaur? Did it look the same? Is time a constant, or does it shift based on the being that is perceiving it? So then allow your mind to travel sideways, backwards, forwards, upwards, downwards. Are we going forward in time, or somehow are we actually going backward simultaneously right now. All of these experiences in the spiritual journey where people say, okay, I went back to the womb, I went back to my childhood, I went back to the earth, I went back into we're shifting time. We're going into it almost like it wasn't just time, it's becoming like a space. And that space is our body itself. So I meditate upon these because I've seen it inside me. And when people conceptualize the energy as like a kundalini or like a life force energy and so on and so forth, if you spend enough time, if you spend more time in this and you're holding space for others and people start having questions, it's the philosophy of space and time that would hold the meta or the grand structure of things. If you don't need to, if you don't desire to structure, you don't need to go into it. But if you want a starting point that brings about a growing understanding of what this is, something that doesn't just describe, but begins to bear explanatory powers, time and space would be the meta structure that defines even like what is the mind, that what is the structure of the mind that has something to do with time and space. So energy moves how? There are energy management elements that come into the inner dance and the energy process. And energy moves in different ways. And when we look at the body knows, just to get past this, like, why does the inner dance happen? How does it happen? Why does that energy work the way it does? It really is dependent on how we are moving the energy. It's how we're managing the energy. Mostly, you know, one of the meta theoreticians to explain how we're moving the energy is Darwin. Charles Darwin proposed the idea that evolution, which situates us in a time stream. You know, Darwin really gave us so much of our present understanding of time. Prior to Darwin, time was biblical almost. It's like history is 5,000 years old. God created the universe in 7 days. And when Darwin came, he gave us this time construct that no, we're actually a lot older. But within that proposal, his comment on time is that time is linear and life within linear time is competitive. So the way we manage time energetically is he coined the statement, the survival of the fittest, the strongest survive. So in a way, we always have to compete. There's something about competition and time that are hipped together in a way. So when you transcend time, what you transcend is an energetic management situation called competition and also consumption. Like so much of our fears of death and other fears, so much of our limitations is based in the way we define time. So in a way, we're going past Darwin. So we're interested in what comes after Darwin, and the body will have a lot to say about that. So from consumption and competition, we're now experiencing energy conservation, and conversion would be more like healing. It's like we're altering, we're transforming the things inside the body. There's energy collaboration, communion, energy consciousness. All of these can be mapped out in waves. All of these are taking place right now if you are in the energetic process. So to try to understand what the music does and to try to understand what happens when we touch the body in certain ways and there are certain effects, it means that there is conservation even conversation, conversion, collaboration, communion, and consciousness beginning to take place, which means we're moving away from consumption and competition. And that's really one of the events and manifestations that take place when we move from time into space. In a way, there's a philosophical concept of the becoming space of time. When people say, okay, I need more time, do they actually mean I need more space? What does time give you? If time expands, it gives you more space. And when time is limited, we become very consumptive and competitive. So to move into energy conservation, energy consciousness, energy communion, we need more space. So going back to this really important term, the Zeitgeber, this is a circadian rhythm terminology. The Zeitgeber is that which gives you time. So anything you ingest, anything that happens externally that synchronizes your clock is called a Zeitgeber. It could be a food, it could be a medicine, it could be music, it could be touch, it could be words. Anything that alters your perception of time is a Zeitgeber. So this is what you could call yourself. If you are a facilitator, what are you doing? You're actually giving people time. This is what people are looking for. Like, I need more time. The whole illusion of death is based on there's not enough time. You need more time. And when you transcend death, what happens is you're given time. So what you're becoming is a Zeitgeber. You're becoming the time giver. And what that brings about is an energy conservation. It's like you get to save what's being consumed. You know, you make deposits and then withdrawals and all these other possible. You see it in different ways. All these other C's that are interesting. Okay, so other aspects of the body, they're interesting. So much of life is really about the response mechanism, isn't it? Like, to be responsible is to be able to respond. And somehow so much of our depressions and our suffering is based on this inability to respond well. It's like I can't. Everything's reactive nowadays in so many different ways. Like you hear something and then you need to think a thought in correspondence to that thing that you heard or the thing that you saw. So the grand motivators that brings about these series of responses would be the stress response system and the rewards system. Even in the inner dance process, a lot of people come to the room because of a problem, a personal or even a global crisis, which could be the greatest spiritual teacher, really, or it's because they somehow feel it's going to give pleasure, it's going to make them feel good. So beyond the inner dance, beyond the spiritual process, this is what gets people out of bed, to avoid pain and to find pleasure. You know, it could be as simple as, okay, if I go to work, then that would give me rewards, and that would also keep me from getting in trouble, because if I run out of money, it's like a whole chain of stress and rewards response systems. And obviously, definitely, we're beyond this. We're interested in what does it mean to not just be a highly reactive, highly sensitized being? What does it mean to not just react? It's to shuffle those letters, react or to create. Do I react or do I create? Am I subject to the world? Am I purely a victim of the external world, or am I actually able to manifest my reality? And somehow we need to do something in relation with the outside world, but there are these internal mechanisms operating that is a product of the conditioning reflexes, right? It's like, okay, I'm a product of my past, what some people call trauma. And if I wanted to change my reality, if I wanted to change my life, I need to change those conditionings. So the question would be, what are those conditionings? Are they just personal conditionings? Are they the conditionings of my family? And it just keeps going deeper and deeper. These stress and reward systems are so old. They're so much bigger. They're probably that which belongs to the species or to all living organisms. Is the pain avoidance just something that came out of my biography, or is it something that is inherited from all of those organisms that ever experienced pain, you know? So firstly, the stress response system, something to do with brain, breath, and blood. We would focus on that in inner dance. When we activate the fight or flight mechanism, the heartbeat, the beat per minute, the BPM, the music of the body, the pacemaker of the body is the heart. Something happens to the heart, and then the breath, and the brain. And the external world is altering that, but at the same time, it's up to you. Can you control your heart? You can control your breath, but can you do it throughout the whole day, even when you're sleeping? And can you control your brain waves? Like literally, if I tell you, go into the mu state, go into sensory motor rhythm, go into delta right now. Do you have control of these? So entrainment states, it's what's happening in the room that controls this. And for that reason, when we hear something we don't like, when something irritates us, the fight or flight mechanism is triggered. And then the reward system, after you're satiated, okay, now I'm good. Now I can slow down. Brain and breath and blood starts to go into these mechanisms. So we're sharing these playlists primarily to bring observation to these mechanisms, not to allow an external agent to manipulate you, but to allow you to understand just how much you've been manipulated by these external sensory registers. Sometimes it's really just a word. It's really just an image. It's really just a sound. But why do we get stressed out? So we're now stuck with the fact that we're always trying to look for that which would calm us, that which would slow things down. Yet we're also stuck with a situation where the more things slow down, eventually after the energy work, the massage, the vacation, when you go back to reality, you would eventually go back to like this again. It's like we're hopping back and forth, like this and this, that and that, trying to find some kind of homeostasis or space in between, where the fast and the slow seem to be indiscriminate. It's like there's no line separating the two, and that's the art, that's the spirit, that is the whole point in inner dance. The non-dual state between high and low becomes your bread and butter, your grist to the mill. This becomes your, that becomes your, that's the substance. That's the substance here, in the long term. So when people say activation and that word, very often when we don't know what's happening and yet we're still going deep, very often we're actually just reactivating that which is old. When we learn more in sophisticated ways how to work with the tools, then new patterns can come about. In the beginning, when facilitators try to come up with mechanisms, okay, I want to use this music, or okay, I want to calm people, I want to excite and arouse people. There's like a seesaw. There's like a swing that makes participants go back and forth. So yeah, definitely they'll feel good during the session, but what is going to happen the hour, the day, the week after the process? Very often a fantastic journey could actually make certain things worse in life itself because of the attachments of certain sensations that come up within the process, so that anything outside of it becomes like not spiritual. So balancing out the dualities would be the way, and that takes some time. So we would need to talk about these mechanisms more structurally, more slowly, and more deeply to slowly understand. So even though you might have heard some of these terms before, some of the concepts and insights that bridge these terms into the picture would be quite new, even in the hard sciences. We would be supported by the sciences. We would need to do research of what is in the sciences, but some of the insights are quite rare. They are out there, but they're quite sensitive and vulnerable still. So we take our time to hold these terms from the basics into the complex. So yeah, I took this image last minute from the internet, and it was clear when I put them there, and it got blurry. The thing behind the kind of bluish one on the left is the no, sorry, the peripheral nervous system. It's hard to read. Is made up of the somatic and the autonomic nervous system. So I think we need to make a distinction between the part of your central and peripheral nervous system that is more voluntary as opposed to the involuntary, right? So how does yoga, how does Pilates, how does exercise differ from inner dance? In the former, or the first examples, here's where you're tapping into the aspects of your nervous system where you have control, where you would come from will, from action, from yeah, that which you can control. You can give orders to your brain to send messages to your right arm to move a certain way. But in inner dance, something else is in control. So the part of the nervous system, which is the pathway for electricity, magnetism, light, and information in your body, that would be interesting would be the autonomic nervous system. It's the part that acts on its own will. There's like a really deep intelligence that's coordinating your hormones, your neurotransmitters. It's controlling this complexity of a thing that has, you know, billions of neurons, like 50 billion neurons here. Something is coordinating that, and that is autonomic. When you feel into the heart, the heartbeat, it seems, okay, that doesn't seem so complicated as the neuronal, the synaptic, but the heart probably is a lot more complex than just thump, 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 thump. The heart knows. The heart, in fact, in the inner dance process, is the entrainment mechanism. The heartbeat influences the brain waves. When you look at brainwave entrainment, okay, that's interesting. Let me just play a sound. But what those interested in brainwave entrainment miss out is what actually shifts brainwaves is the heartbeat. So let's expand entrainment from brainwave entrainment. We could call it, let's say, circadian entrainment or autonomic entrainment, like brain, breath, and blood. Your heartbeat, your breath rate, and your brainwaves are all altering at the same time. And what is in charge of this is the autonomic or automatic nervous system. You want to talk about the intuitive body, go to the autonomic nervous system. That is what knows. It coordinates everything unconsciously or subconsciously, and you don't need to give orders to that. That is the opposite of the somatic nervous system. That's the involuntary nervous system. So to go back to time, if the autonomic nervous system has something to do with the spasms, the convulsions, the seizures, or even the movements, the way the fingers or the arms or the legs, the neck, when the body begins to move like that, especially the spine. I was chatting with Mick, I think yesterday, and he wanted us to talk about the thing that the spine does when, you know, the spine arches and then the head like tilts back. Like, what does that mean? The autonomic nervous system, the automatic nervous system is responsible for that. So back to time, the element of time. What is moving the body in this way? What is influencing the autonomic nervous system? Why does your heartbeat race when you see something that you don't like? Is it really evil or bad or intensely or awful energetically that it affects your body in this way? If that is a perception, because some people will see the same thing that you see and they will not be scared, then the mechanisms are internal, right? And the autonomic nervous system manages that. So that's when we could talk about history and even trauma, where all of the response mechanisms that took place inside your body programs you. How did you react to danger and to pleasure? That trained your mind and your body to walk a certain way, to speak a certain way, to think automatically a certain way. And a lot of those are, in fact, because your body felt like pain. You know, it's like, oh, okay, don't do that. That hurts. Don't go there. That sucks. That you know, that's terrible. Oh, go there. That's cool. That's interesting. That's divine. That's a seesaw effect. And so the main insight here, which could be the main insight of all things in the inner dance, is like, why do we do it? Why do we do it? How does it work? we do inner dance because we want to respond differently. We want to retrain the autonomic nervous system not to run away when it's terrified, not to keep going for that which seems to give pleasure, but which doesn't actually bring about transformation. It's just creating an addiction. So when we lay down and when we close our eyes and when we use the music and we touch, when we speak to the room, everything about inner dance is designed to allow people to respond differently. One of the definitions of inner dance that I would give to people in the past when they would ask, okay, could you describe what is inner dance? I would tell them, sometimes it's the ability to be afraid without being scared. When your heartbeat races, thump, 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 and then when you're stuck there, laying down with your eyes closed, the thing that was fear becomes power. It becomes an energy. It actually becomes pleasurable. The thing that you were avoiding, what is it that happens when you're scared? Something happens to your heartbeat, right? And what you tap into is the sympathetic nervous system. It's interesting though, because when you're also excited, it is in fact the same mechanism. Your heartbeat starts to race. So either because there's a problem or there's an excitement, the body knows what to do. It speeds up time. And then we go into a very active and often reactive state of awareness. And then when we trust, when it's safe, when it's all beautiful and it's all good and you're surrounded by good, amazing people, then we can slow, then healing happens. We're not hiding anything because we know things are being looked at, being dealt with, being brought out into the open. So these are simple pointers. You would look deeper into them in time if you're interested, and they would just keep opening up the fight or flight, or the rest and digest, and the trust responses. When you look at these from within the spiritual experience, we would find certain things. We would discover mechanisms at work. But even if we didn't go deeper, just understanding simply these terms, it already kind of helps, because when you make choices in the way you hold people, depends on where you touch. How do you hold them? Why are you using that sound? Why are you humming? Why are you choosing that piece of music? It already helps to know, what are you activating? Like, what are you moving? Right? So that's the thing about autonomy. Very often people ask, like, what is free will? You know, is there destiny? Are we slaves to destino, to fate? Do I have actually control over today or tomorrow, or is everything pre-planned? Has it already happened? Autonomy is a key term. Chemistries of change, brain, bath, and blood. Music is a beautiful metaphor for the body. In a way, the body has a song. Tempo, tonality, texture. You could also think about rhythm, harmony, and melody. The heart, the lungs, and the brain create a song, and we are altering song. So it's really never just about music. You cannot learn music without understanding the operations of the body. Brain, breath, and blood, rhythm, harmony, melody, tempo, tonality, texture. So in the next weeks, the next months, maybe the next years, we will study how we are altering the song in the body. We've already spoken about this. You could just keep listing things down, and the inner dance is actually a concert of all of these, even though it's not obvious. Not light and dark, even climate. The temperature in people's bodies change during the waves, within the waves, like rising and falling. The body gets super hot at times, or it cools down. So these are entrainment mechanisms that have conditioned us since we were young. And to change a person means shifting these conditions. It doesn't seem connected often, you know, when you do biographical or psychological psychiatric work. It's not easy to interrelate that with body conditions. Like what do your thoughts, what do your belief structures have to do with these things of the body? We don't need to argue. We don't need to have an argument about that, because we're already observing when these conditions, the physical conditions change, the nature of my thoughts are changing. You could try to change your thoughts without changing your body, and see how far that goes. Okay, tomorrow I'm just going to be happy. I'm going to be amazing. I'm just going to turn on the amazing switch inside my head. There's something about the body. There's something about these internal waves, sound waves, light waves, wavelength reflectances in color. All of these are changing. And I think when you impersonalize that, when you impersonalize music, for example, music isn't just a thing that comes out on radio. Music is the whole tradition of how we organize vibrations, living on Earth for a long time. And that has a really deep history. That has a really deep story. Emotions, cognition, all of these are organizable, and that's what we've done. And we're actually reorganizing and disorganizing these because we're looking for a better way these things come together. Spatial temporality, it's about time and space. Everything is about time and space. I think I need to go to another app. I didn't set this up yet, but let's do this quick. Oop. I'm not sure if you can see it, but let me press some buttons. New share. Okay, so I think I need to stop share with this. And then, okay, so I guess you can see my screen. Here's my pen. There, pen. Okay. So it's about to draw in my mouth, my cursor. Oh, it's not working. Oh. Oh, it's because the thing isn't plugged in. Sorry for these technical things. No, it doesn't work. Never mind. Sorry about that. Back to Prezi. Okay, so I'll generalize. Maybe that's something for another call. Why is this here? So just looking at the binary axis of time and space. Time is the horizontal on this really blurry photo. Horizontal meaning it's a flat. It's the sequential line that moves from left to right. Space is the one that is splayed out across top to bottom. We're exploring either space or time. And when we become linear, we live in time. And in the body, when your body becomes situated in time, information becomes really packed in. It's basically like time packed. So every second compacts all of the moments, all the information, all of the meanings are now unraveling one moment at a time. What takes place in the journey and what happens when you go into the journey. Okay, you lay down, you close your eyes, and then you receive vibrations. So suddenly there's more. It's not like one at a time, it's like all at once. So that's a concept, but to then embody that, to then relate that to your body, everything that we do in inner dance is designed to expand awareness into the all at once. Just think about it. It's like, okay, why am I suddenly horizontal? Why am I pretending I'm asleep? Why am I activating my dream state? Okay, that's still conceptual, but on a body level, there are certain things now happening in the body that could be, let's say, neurological or cardiovascular or respiratory, but then relate that to time and space. How are you altering time and space in the body in relationship to the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system? When you are having to go to work, when you open your eyes in the morning, you know you need to drive your car, you need to go somewhere, that time would need to go linear on you, right? Okay, I need to do my groceries, so here's the list of the things I need to buy. I have a schedule, I have a deadline for work. These are the things that I need to do in sequence, not to mess it up. I need to organize it like one at a time. So everything that you're doing in the journey, it's as simple as that. Like, how could you allow for more creativity? How do you create the conditions where people can see more transcending that sequence? What are they missing out? Emotionally, cognitively, and physically. That becomes your art. How do you use your creativity? Because you can use any sound, really. You can touch the body in any way you want. You can speak to the room in any way. There's no need to mystify things always, but it is good to bring in mystery. It's up to you. Like, how do you open the space? And so structurally, what you're doing is you're shifting or altering time in people's bodies. So you almost need to design that. Like later on we'll be talking about like how far back do you want people to go? Do you wish to create an experience of earth? Do you wish to create an experience of like childhood emotion? You use the elements that are there to move them across time or space. Time would be more historical, wouldn't it? Like space would be more geographical. Like, do you want them to go to Africa? Would you like them to go to Mars? Would you like them to go to the Milky Way? Would you like them to go to Japan in the in the 12th century? It's up to you. There are so many mechanisms that you could use to bring about an expansion of memory. Okay, so I really wanted to draw it out, but this may not be exactly how I would have spoken it, but so it's so not clear. I think there's better ways of doing these images, importing them. Simply put, you will affect people's heartbeats. You will touch people's hearts. When you ask people to enter your space, you will touch their heart in a figurative, metaphorical way. It's so beautiful, touching their hearts. But it's also really literal. Now, the heart isn't just an organ, it organizes information. It lets you know when you need the energy to run fast, to work hard, to excite, even to fall in love. It tells you when it's safe, when it's going to slow down. So the language of the heart operationally is based upon what's called cardiac output. That is what you would alter. One aspect of cardiac output is called the heart rate. And I find it fascinating that the measurement of the heart, which is beats per minute, is exactly how you measure tempo in music, the rhythm. You have a drummer. So one explanation evolutionists give as to why does music exist is actually because the drum beat, the rhythm was there even before we emerged from the womb. So the other element of the cardiac output is called stroke volume. So not only is it about speed, which is about time, it's also about space, like how much blood is flowing through the arteries and the veins. So I just want to state it simply, when you're looking at these bodies moving, going through these energetic process, it's not really visible that the heart is changing, but the heart is changing. And when you change the vibration in the room, heart rate and stroke volume will alter, and that determines whether people would be scared or would be trusting, fear or trust. Chemistries of the breath. Just look at the waves because it's not clear. Breath rate and breath depth. You can still measure the breath through time and space. I need to move to this side. You see. You alter the music, you alter the way you hold bodies, you will alter this, respiration. They speed things up, they slow things down. Now, understand, breathing alters time perception. Whether you're sleeping or whether you're awake, when your breathing changes, you will alter time. It has something to do with the fact that the brain parts that are activating the dream or REM state are also what is regulating your breath. So when you alter the breath, you actually alter time perception. And so the breath has sound properties. I find that interesting. Even when you open some of the apps that we will be sharing with you guys, rate and depth are in fact holding the grid of many effects, many sound properties. So the breath has sound properties. So notice it in the process. You could notice it now. Your breath alters your thoughts. And so what happened during the time of the pandemic, in COVID time, when we were wearing these face masks, and I don't want to negate that. I do feel that something deepened when we were forced to breathe through the cloth or the fabric that was forced upon us. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I believe that everything happens for a reason. So during COVID-19 time, it's debatable whether it's still happening or not. I wasn't going into a debate whether, okay, is this okay or not? I was more interested in what are these restrictions doing to the body and to awareness. And I did see that people went very deep during during the last years, and it had something to do partly with rate and depth. We were being trained to breathe actually like so much deeper. And I think we might be missing out on a lot of those gains when things went back to normal. So we may need to harvest those gains through the experiences we're having now. So I think these are interesting. I'm not going to simplify this for you. I'm bringing it up so you can notice them, that which is happening in autonomic ways. And then, of course, we would need to look at the different states of consciousness, otherwise called the brain waves or neural oscillations. We're going to be throwing these terminologies around when we begin to look especially at the music. We will never invalidate music. Every subtle change in the sound will alter the space. Even the smallest sound, when people are going into expanded states of awareness, subliminally, they will undergo altered states, a change in perception. So when you learn to speak vibration using sound and any other mechanisms, you don't need just music in order to alter neural oscillations. Entrainment can happen through so many means. When you know how to activate gamma, beta, alpha, theta, delta, mu, and SMR, and high oscillating frequencies, then you take them there. So for those who've been experimenting with the playlists shared in our group space, that's what they contain. The playlists are a soup of these different ingredients called waves or oscillations. Okay, so so here's where the theories come together. The loose terms kind of integrate here. Why and how innerdance? Innerdance is the co-activation of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, maybe even the somatic and the autonomic nervous system, maybe the central and peripheral nervous system. But it's the co-activation of fear and trust. When we approach a non-duality, and we're not avoiding, and we're not, addicted as well to just trying to make everything be good. When these two start to cooperate or co-activate, that's when a real transformation dimensionally happens. So when I say this, I work with, it could be an assumption, it could be a real theory, it could be, based upon observations of thousands and thousands of bodies observed, the co-activation of fear and trust is rare. The simultaneous experience of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system is rare. It's something that normally does not happen in our conscious reality. It happens in altered reality, and I have these 4 bubbles on the screen as examples of when are those moments taking place when fear and trust are in a co-activation with each other. So when we are in the dream state, for example, it's blurry, I apologize, but there's a certain playlist. This is the playlist. The waves that you see is the playlist. When we design a playlist, are we just making things up? Are we just creating a sequence that feels right? When I make my outlines and place things one on top of each other, am I just doing it? Or do I actually have like a framework? Do I have a mechanism? Do I have a blueprint? I do. And it's the sleep cycle that takes place within a circadian rhythm. The stages of dream that takes people from non-REM 1, non-REM 2, non-REM 3, back to non-REM 2, maybe onto non-REM 4, and then into REM state, the rapid eye movement that signifies the dream process. That's one example of when fear and trust are co-activated with each other, which is to say the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system are in a very heightened collaboration, meaning that in life, when we're not dreaming, when we're not asleep, when we're supposed to work hard, to be awake, to be hyper, to be alert, that's when it is appropriate. And when we're supposed to slow down, to relax, to take a vacation, then we make space for that. So what innerdance does is it allows both of those to happen at the same time, and it's based on the autonomic nervous system's functions. So automatically we actually do that every night, and the reason why we go to sleep is in fact a dream, and the only reason why we're dreaming is to co-activate the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system at the same time. If you don't co-activate fear or trust, the sympathetic and parasympathetic at the same time, what would happen is death. The reason why you sleep is to dream, and the reason why you dream is to balance out the brain waves, the neural oscillations, rate and depth, stroke volume, and heart rate. If you don't do that, then we will not achieve a homeostasis that is required to sustain life. That's why we sleep. It's not just to rest, it's to balance out the waves. So in spiritual awakening, we're finding out that we can actually also co-activate fear and trust and the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So it's blurry, but basically to the left is the parasympathetic, to the right is the sympathetic. In the parasympathetic, everything expands. So like the pupils dilate, the breath deepens, heart slows down, digestive organs relax. And in the sympathetic nervous system, things contract, pupils constrict. We go into problem solving situations of the body, so the heartbeat speeds up. And these are medical terms. Why am I putting this within a spiritual awakening bubble? I think I'm doing it because I'm doing it. Just to relate that there are some invisible things that need to be made visible, so that the bypassing is worked on. When you do look at other things that bring about spiritual awareness, such as psychedelics, okay, the green is signifying stimulants. It's when you ingest things that activate like focus, hyper reality, stress response mechanisms. The blue circle would be depressants. It's when you slow down time. It's like, okay, when normally when we go into avoidant situations and we try to dull the senses so that we don't have to sense the world, the co-activation of stimulants and depressants could either be the yellow. The yellow is hallucinogenic. It's psychedelic. So when you co-activate coffee and alcohol, let's say sleeping pills and cocaine, you would go into a hallucinogenic experience. The red is also a combination or co-activation of stimulants and depressants, but it's basically what antipsychotics does. It balances things out, not in the hallucinogenic frame. You still get both, but there's a homeostasis. There's a middle line, so that people can still be in the world even though they are able to access both. Not in an extreme way. Innerdance more or less brings people more into the yellow side of things, but after so much work has been done, then we slowly move into the red side of things. So if we were to use this without having drugs or substances or plant medicine in mind, using just sound, how are you stimulating, depressing, or bringing people into hallucinatory or antipsychotic mechanisms? So that's one example of what humans are doing in order to reach a heightened level of the co-activation of fear and trust. The reason why a lot of people are going into plant medicine journeys is because, aside from going into the dream state, when they don't have access to spiritual awakening tools, psychedelics is a very fast and very big way of activating the sympathetic and the parasympathetic at the same time. And all of these three examples, the dream state, the spiritual awakening, and the psychedelic experience, we know from what we've been through that there is an alteration of time as we know it. Like we go back to deep memory, we go launch ourselves into the future. So that is what happens when we go into the non-duality of these two elements that we're swimming back and forth from. In the death experience, something very similar happens, but in a way like so much more. In terms of brain, breath, and blood, when we're about to die, it's like I'm scared, and that could be maybe an instance where the sympathetic nervous system reaches its height. It's like, okay, I'm about to die. I don't want to die. I'm about to die. I'm scared. And your heart is pumping. Your breathing is confused. It doesn't know whether to spike or to be shallow, just to conserve what you have. Your brain is just, in sheer terror of the fact that you're on your deathbed, or you're there splattered on the road because of an accident. I bring this up not so much because of the experience of dying. It's more of the awareness of what it means to die, and what people who have died and have come back have shared when they were aware of what happened to time at the point of death. So this is where the co-activation of fear and trust really comes into full view. When you are severely stressed by the fact that you might die, it's when you surrender to that possibility, according to research, primarily through the lens of a neuroscientist named Kevin Nelson. He's the first man to look into this. He was interested in the question, why is it that some people go into the life review, this event in which your whole life flashes before your eyes at the moment of death? He noticed that some people don't go through that experience. Some people, they see the tunnel, they see colors, but not a lot of people experience their whole life flashing before their very eyes in 1 second. And based on his research, it's those people who are able to let go at the point of terror. It's at that moment when the parasympathetic nervous system was activated, when the sympathetic nervous system was hyperactive. That is the point in which time perception expands so that a second becomes like a whole life. Inception style. A second, it's like a dream reality. The second is like the whole of existence, and it doesn't even need to be like one life. It could be a totality. Sometimes people who have near-death experience, it happens in seconds, but the experience they relate, wow, I was there for a long time. I looked at the architecture of reality, of the universe, and it was amazing. And so in a way, this is what we're doing. And especially when we look at this example, it is okay to sometimes take it to the breakthrough level, because sometimes people would get worried, like, is this too much? Is this too intense? Is this, could I get a heart attack? Can I actually, collapse from my heartbeat moving so fast? I've not really experienced anyone in the innerdance having a heart attack yet. I do believe that there are some similarities there, but I don't think you can get a heart attack, because when you go beyond gamma, when you go beyond beta frequencies, when you then enter into gamma oscillations, the waves actually become smaller. The amplitude of the waves becomes smaller, so that the faster you go, the smaller the wavelengths and the smaller the amplitudes. So even though you speed up, you can't get a heart attack, because the resistance is something we let go of. And then beyond gamma, we enter the highest frequencies. They're called high oscillating frequencies. And when you reach those frequencies, when you enter those oscillations, that's when time expands fully into space. So when people say, okay, don't even feel my body anymore, I don't have a body, that's when vibrationally you found a way to channel the highest and the fastest and the tiniest waves that are there. They're always there. You don't accumulate, you don't take it in from the outside. Just the activation of it means something needs to die almost for something to emerge and rebirth. Okay, so more or less, I think that's my outline. I'm gonna do a time check. That's my outline for today. I really do need to go into these introductory elements, because these are what we would operate from. We could adapt spiritual terminologies to these, but the whole philosophy and the whole set of theories that come out of inner dance that brings about consistency. You know, like you can change as many things as you like. You could bring subjective, playful elements as much as you like. Something you'd be interested in is what is constant? What are the rules if I was to play a game? What is the container if I was to hold the substance that doesn't need to spill over all over? This is the constant, the duality. The spiritual explanations of these would be more of the, like, what is light? Light is a dance between not the sympathetic and parasympathetic. That's the embodiment thing. But if it wasn't embodied, the dance is between electricity and magnetism. Electricity is that which blows up, it expands, it electrifies. If you've ever experienced electricity, you know what electricity does. And magnetism is the property that binds, that brings things together, it makes things stick. It gravitates, it holds things down. So light is a double helical wave of electricity and magnetism turning into each other. It's the feminine and the masculine, the east and the west, form and flow turning into each other. So we talk about the autonomic nervous system only in the sense that light has been embodied. And so thought, or the mind, as we normally describe it, could be ascribed to magnetism. And when we say we're thinking too much, it means that magnetism has become the dominant wave. And electricity, intuition, or kundalini is that which rests and hides, depressed in the body. So when we activate life force energy, we're interested in what are the mechanisms that allow magnetism to descend. You know, the thing that holds things too tight, the attachment. What is it that allows that to descend and allows for internal energy mechanisms to arise? So that's a concert. That could be intuitive too, but there are a lot of consistent things that could be talked about. It's not just subjective, it's objective. There's certain ways, even in terms of positioning the body, not just touching the body, the way the body is positioned alters time perception. Moving an arm towards a certain direction will extend within here. Moving this would extend this region. So when you can see, no, when you watch people's bodies and you can see them like holding themselves in a particular way, they're already communicating. So bringing these into concert, what are the ways in which you can allow magnetism to lower, which magnetism is the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is that which is hiding the higher frequencies. So even though it's talking about like relax, calm, there's actually like higher, faster frequency that needs to rise from within, from underneath. So what is the concert of techniques and tools and perceptions and expressions that allow people to trust, to let go, to expand, and to open? So you know when to trigger, to awaken, to allow the vibrations, to allow the contractions to come, which clarifies when you do use the words fear and trust. Don't negate fear. Fear is actually a superpower. Don't hide fear. Don't negate it. Don't think that fear is bad. Fear is an energy that just got trapped inside the body that now is being controlled and sustained by the mind. So when you transform fear, fear becomes an energy and a power, and then an emotion, and then an insight. Learn to work with those. Those are your tools. Become friends with those. Psychologize the room. Understand how minds are operating. What is the cause for stress? Why do people contract? What are the things to hold here? So I could expand and slow down. And in the right timing, I will let them look at what they're most afraid of, using certain trigger mechanisms that I can embed in the music, or how I use my language, or how it would touch them in certain ways. Okay, so that's why and how inner dance. I will be happy to open the space to see if we can have maybe a dialogue around these topics. Could be the questions, clarifications, you have some insights that you're picking up that start to explain certain experiences that you had, let's say this week, last month's, last year's, how you might want to take this deeper. So yeah, I'll press the mute button, see if anyone has anything. I'll stop share for now. So thank you for listening. Or maybe wait, I have a suggestion. Let's do a break. I myself need to pee, and some of you might be thirsty. It would help you to formulate your head around this. So just free yourself up. You can share almost anything you want. Doesn't even need to be super related. Let's just keep a conversation going. So how about maybe 2 minutes? All right, see you then. Okay, I think almost everyone's with us back. Okay, so why don't you guys, the ones who typed some of their questions, why don't you speak it? Be nice to hear it voiced out.
Shall I go?
Yeah.
So I was trying to think about this quite a bit more recently, in this like relationship between sound and magnetism and the cymatic effect when sound creates shape, and you see like the sounds running through the plate. And we had like a bit of a discussion about it, and I was trying to think a bit more deeply about it. And so I was wondering if you'd maybe be able to speak to that a little bit, because there was also, it's all like swimming around in my head at the minute. It's not found a place to position itself linearly across time exactly, but it's a phagic stage. But it's also something to do with like the articulated sounds, the words, and the embedded meaning in them, and this thing of sound being deconstructive. Sound can deconstruct things, but it's also constructive and can create things as well. And I was thinking about like logocentrism and the logos and speaking forward things into creation. All of this is kind of swimming around, and I haven't found a place. I haven't found like an order to it exactly yet, but I feel there's something in all of that that part of me really wants to make sense of.
Yeah, totally. I brought this up in Turkey. I spoke about it in some ways in the Europe processes. I'm interested in it. It seems to want to be heard somehow. It has something to do with temperature and climate. Because what you're talking, what you brought up was sound, and how sound is bearing form, bearing shape. So it's very recent that science realized sound has magnetic properties. You're mentioning sound and magnetism in the same sense. And intuitively, it's almost kind of obvious. It's like sound in many ways helps to shape thought. When you're able to sound things out, the vibration starts to come into like an image almost. So that can get embodied somehow, right? So that everything that you are vibrating might start to hold a thought, and then the thought starts to hold the experience. But another thing being brought into the picture in the world right now is that the magnetic properties of the sound has something to do with temperature, with climate. And so one justification I have in sharing innerdance, especially at this time, is that especially with what's happening in climate change, peak oil, the Ukraine war, the world is about to become extremely hot and cold, depending on where you're at, you know, seasonality wise. And it's really just starting. Like what we're experiencing now is really just a glimpse. So knowing you, Tom, who's worked with Wim Hof and have exposed yourself to very, very extreme cold, especially you've lived in really warm climates. One interesting sharing or phenomenon I've received over the years is when people write to me, it's very common. It's more common than you might think. I was taking a really, really hot shower, someone would say, and I just kept increasing the heat. But for some reason, it felt cold. At the same time, the opposite could be true. So I'm interested in how we can actually help the earth, because we're using up a lot, like a lot of fossil fuels, a lot of oil, both to heat up and to warm up, like abodes, structures, homes. Like in China, when the heat wave came in 2022, like they entered into a power crisis because everyone's turning on their air conditioning. They just couldn't be in the earth anymore. It's so hot. But then it becomes a vicious cycle, right? So when we do healing, it's like we're altering we're altering temperature. For me, when my Kundalini went into all these waves, it would be like a really hot day, and people would be looking at me. Why are you wearing a jacket, Pi? Well, why are you feeling cold when everyone is like blistering hot? It had something to do with my metabolism. I think metabolism could be interesting as a concept. It's like there are certain personalities and body types that hold information longer, and that could be thought of as, say, like fat. Fat is information being stored. It's still energy, and it takes place in countries that needs to store temperature traditionally because of the living conditions in these places. And then there are certain metabolic types that don't hold information. It just passes through. It just passes through you. It doesn't matter how much people eat. You don't seem to have this ability to hold the information. And so when you look at that from like an emotional or mental standpoint, a lot of people whose metabolisms tend to be slow, they're the ones who hold information emotionally in a very, in a more dense way. It's not universal. You would see a lot of heavy set people who can be quite light, but they are holding information still in, you know. So there are these waves people go through, and very often in the journey, people change their diet. Something's happening to their metabolism, and I feel that has something to do with the way we are holding the shape, the geometry, the how much we're magnetizing information. So I read something really interesting in the beginning of my revision quest before it was already when I was walking. I picked up on something. It was a physics study. And the study was talking about how the magnetism of the earth was descending and the electricity was rising. The average hertz frequency in the earth was rising and the magnetism was lowering. So what happens when the magnetism goes down? Right? It's like the magnetism holds things together. So the higher the magnetism, the more things stay static, the more things stay stable. They don't change. And when magnetism drops and electricity rises, it could be any metaphor. It could be, let's say, an earthquake, political upheaval, economic crisis, rates of disease, you know, like when a civilization, when a species, when the earth itself undergoes changes. So it seems what's happening in the climate, what's happening in, there's more stuff moving around. It's debatable though. You could think, oh, okay, stuff is always moving around, but on like just interrelating the fact that it's getting hotter and colder because of the heat, and it's also and magnetism is also going down. That probably means that sound is also changing vibrationally. So it would be really cool to do, let's say, internal experimentations. So if cymatics is a way of seeing what patterns are in the sound, how do you bear deeper relationship with the images that appear in the in the journey process? Like how do you start to map out what they mean? Not from a three-dimensional plane, not from a literal plane. It would have to be from a multi-dimensional space where you can take account for how the context is being held. It's like pictures painting other pictures and other pictures. There are philosophies and perspectives and what, you know, like dimensions you can come from in order to see what is the bigger picture, what is not just the thing that seems to be speaking but is never what is speaking. It's always that which is deeper. So I think there's something big in what I'm explaining that I hope merits a little bit of where you're coming from. The only productive thing I can come out of what I've just said is we just need to choose. I think we need to situate ourselves in a world that's already experiencing this reduction of the thing that binds, the thing that's gluing things together. It's melting almost, which is when change and transformation happens. So we really just need to invest more of ourselves to be exactly there when the transformation is happening. So, you know, like before my mind would go into these thoughts, okay, what if the Kundalini in the world rises up? What would we be ready for that? Like I was partly working with, okay, we need a structure to contextualize this so that this could be understood even within schools and hospitals, governments, corporations, NGOs, the institutions, you know. So that was for me the need, that there was like a need for a magnetism to hold all of this electricity that would arise, so that we don't just splatter and, you know, just trigger everyone into there has to be some sort of context and a code that allows all this content, all this subjectivity, all this I desire, I'd like things to go there, to be held within a collective space. So I think balancing both are important, and discrediting or canceling out magnetism has been the practice in many spiritual disciplines. But to be interested in how do things form, how do things shape, sound, temperature, and magnetism, I think, are important things to interrelate to each other. There's more. There's something about phonons versus photons. I don't want to go into it. It's a little bit much, but I hope this helps. Anyhow, let me know if you have additional thoughts around it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I did have one thought as you were speaking. I was thinking about the idea of the electricity of the earth rising, but it's almost like it, I don't know, tell me what you think about it, but it felt like seeing that increase in electricity being channeled into perhaps like an potentially obsolete mind structure, like a technological explosion, like a technological exponential technological explosion, which is based on a value system of just never-ending progress, like a kind of a linear value system. Whereas actually, if there is, for like the electricity to be rising and not to necessarily be channeled into exponential, ever increasing, getting better and better tech, but something a bit different, like how to switch it into something a bit more transformational instead of that linear exponential technological curve.
Just even this very phenomenon of the electricity rising is interesting. So the old average was supposedly around between 7 and 8 hertz, and it was increasing and seeming to stabilize somewhere between 12 and 13 based on the text that I read. So for example, when you look at the image of the flower of life, right? The seed of life has seven circles, 6 circles around the thing in the middle. And so there's the 7 colors of the rainbow, and then there's 7 sounds of the musical scale, the 7 days of the week. So then when you look at the flower of life, the difference between the flower and the seed is that there's 12 circles around the seed. So when you add, let's say, the center circle with the 12 circles, you have 13 circles. So what seems to be happening, and I'm really curious about this, there are people who are sharing in their experiences, and I heard it again today in one of the innerintensive playlist journeys. Someone said, I saw a color I've never seen before. I've heard this so many times, and colors aren't really real in reality. They are wavelength reflectances that are interpreted within the color cones that were evolving inside of us. They're vibrations. The colors are vibrations. What does it mean that people are seeing not just the number 7, but the number 13? You know, like it's like we're moving to another dimension. I like it that there seems to be a similarity between the next dimension and this one, so that they're really all the same. It's just, it depends on how and from where you're looking at the same thing that would alter your experience, so that what is similar is also different. It depends on you, how you experience today. So let's say when you look at psychosis, when you spend time with people in psychosis, what you experience is someone is not living just today. Today is not today. It's many days compacted into a day. It's this day just condenses what is displaced across space and time. And a lot of people have experienced psychoses. They weren't seen as interdimensional awareness. So it's almost the whole thing with electricity and magnetism shifting is really talking about moving into a new earth. It doesn't take away old earth. Old earth exists there in some dimension, but then we move into another dimension. And right now, because we're in between, there's a confusion. It's like we're experiencing 2 dimensions or 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever at the same time before things have stabilized. And energetically, the journeys are just giving us a glimpse of how things would be if we got there. If you were eating right, if you were living right, we were respecting the planet, we were kind, we weren't holding so much of the restrictions and the sense of limits. That is what the earth could be like. So it's really not about the workshop. That's a glimpse of a dimensionality. It's just another vibration. We just need to get used to it the way we would learn to read. Then we develop like a literacy. You learn a new musical instrument, and you develop another form of literacy, but like a spiritual literacy for this next dimension. We would need to practice. We would need to be invited and more. What used to be weird for some people are now normal. What used to be really intense for some people before are now becoming just more intensive, more like the intensity is there, right? The weirdness is still there, but it's not weird anymore because you're acclimatized. And here you go, preparing for another level of weirdness, but situating that where it's not really mystical only. This is life. This is real. It's simple. It could shape. We could remodel the world around something like this if everything was one. You know. In fact, the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system of the baby is very psychedelic, and it's that simple. It's like we're not innovating, we're just remembering and going back to the origins of the way things used to be. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Anyone has a share?
I have a share on that. When I had a vision in the first class, so last week, I literally had a vision of being on the precipice of the two earths, like, you know, as they're splitting, like that piece, that moment where they're splitting, it's like being on the precipice of that with the frequency that you were emitting, that the group was emitting. I'm not sure. I assume it's a combination, but the birth of the new earth is something I keep seeing over and over in innerdance sessions and things that I'm doing with my clients now. In the last couple of weeks, it's like the emergence of the new keeps coming through, and it makes me think of my resistance. And when you were talking about that magnetism, I feel like I'm starting to understand some of those like weird kind of tension, headaches, or nausea that I get in some of these experiences. In fact, most of them right now. I'm like waiting patiently for that to dissipate. I'm like, when is that going to go away? But I still love the experience. It's just this weird tension. I know it totally has to do clearly with overthought and relying a lot on thought, or maybe just like the upper chakras. I'm not sure, but there's tension that I see myself, and also, like, you know, when I'm working with my clients, I feel like they're also always a reflection of the collective and myself, and I'm seeing us all releasing this tension to get to, or to be a part of, that precipice of the splitting. And I can't say it's the most comfortable thing in the world, but it feels good still, you know. There's some part of me that, and I think all of us, that really enjoys it. And so I just kind of wanted to share that and note that, because that the mental again, like tension, headache, or the weird uncomfortability, not even sure what to call it or how to name it, but it's still there. It's continually there. It's interesting because I even feel it when felt it when I hopped on the call today. I'm like, oh, there it is. Like, what? Like, what is this?
I totally resonate with you, Candice. Because I had to go through the long transition, and I'm really aware of what it might take to get to something new. I'm pretty sure, but I don't know if you watched the movie Lucy by Luc Besson. I might have even referenced it in the last call. The way it ended, and I hope I don't do a spoiler for those who haven't seen it, was this woman experienced 100% of her brain, and she became like an energy, and she was everywhere. And she transferred herself into a USB stick. When you look at the USB stick, it looks like a universe. And that supposedly contains the secrets of the cosmos. So it's like, oh, okay, now we have it. And for me, that's very well true. It's like, okay, we can have it, we can experience it. It's being given to us, it's available. But when I saw that scene in the movie, okay, we have the USB stick, but like, who would read that? How would we receive it? To have a communication, there's a sender, there's the message, there's the channel, and then there's the receiver. So if the message was there and it's being sent by 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000%, I don't think we can receive it if we haven't altered the medium. So unless we become the universe, we cannot receive the universe. So because the body is the medium, and the mind is also the medium. This pain that you speak about, for me, is so personal, how I had to really purge almost, you know, I like to think of the apple that Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, tree of good and evil. How to puke out the apple we would have to go into some kind of spiritual, emotional, physical detox. And I think we're being given gifts by the mother because we need something fast enough that allows us to become one with the earth. And so something like inner dance, I'm not going to centralize inner dance, but something like inner dance helps. You know, you can't just sit down and close your eyes anymore. You can't just stretch your body anymore. It needs to affect the autonomic nervous system where the deepest conditionings are being held. It's about the programming, it's about the conditioning. So to release that is quite a big detox. You know, the pleasure seeking, pain avoiding, it needs to get to the point where the best thing could happen to you and you're like, okay, right. The worst thing could happen to you and say, okay, right. And I don't know the difference anymore. I'm just good because I've been through all of it. Everything is my incarnation. Everyone is my past life. And I feel I'm now coming from a time and space where I've lived through it again and again and again. Now that we're moving forward, after going through that life review, a birth visioning would happen. But like for us to receive that message, we basically, what I'm saying here, or what inner dance is saying, is we need a new body. We can't have this body anymore. This body almost becomes like a supercomputer alien superhero Avengers X-Man woman body. And the starting point is we need a new brain. So a lot of discomfort we're feeling is in the brain. The brain's being rewired. You cannot not listen to this enough. We're gonna keep hearing that my brain's being rewired. The how and the why will follow, but that's gonna hurt because we're the brain is limiting. It's that whole space and time thing. It's sequential. So the inner dance brain is the all at once brain, where a day is not a day, a person is not a person, a place is not a place. They're all universes condensed and they're now being unpacked. People had to go crazy in order to do that before. Now it's like only now is this allowed. Before we would get diagnosed, before we would get imprisoned, before we would get excommunicated, but now it's allowed. And when it was allowed, it's going to be experienced because it's like we've seen this. We've seen so much. We know so much already, but we haven't experienced what we know. The way we're practicing our medicine, the way schools are still being conducted, economics is still happening. It's still based on the illusion of separation. We're still not experiencing what we already know. So right now, I think we are beginning to experience it. That's what the inner dance journeys are. It's like, but to embody that is like another thing altogether. So to be safe, to have enough context, making your home your own retreat center, creating a program where we're evolving and not just recycling old systems. I feel you, especially with the pain that you described. I really enjoyed it. It was really painful, but I enjoyed it because it's the kind of pain where you know something's happening. And so it kind of feels good, but you have to go through it. So yeah, thank you. I think it's very mature for us to bring up things like these in spiritual circles, because that's what is kind of important right now. Okay, so anyone?
Thank you. That is
Mm.
very clarifying. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
I have a question. Hi, my name is Cindy. The how do I even say this? So we have this experience of evolving, and we have these like we're evolving in our consciousness, right? And then we also have this experience of kind of where we are in our own like developmental trajectory and where we're kind of stuck in these places. Is that developmental part the magnetic part? Like baby learns to walk, baby learns to crawl, becomes a teenager, adult, and we're kind of like, is my question making any sense?
Yeah, in a way. This is a rabbit hole of a question. It goes really, really deep. There are these sharings and questions that have come up already in the groups, and I don't know if it's the Earth group, but the question of light language often comes up. Like, what is it? Why is it that this weird language sometimes comes up? It doesn't have to be that. It gets to the point where I don't know what to say. I'm losing my mind, my persona. I'm losing my voice, even my thoughts. I can't sometimes articulate that which wants to be expressed. So from a philosophical and philo-linguistic point of view, language structures our consciousness. The way we hold meanings in our bodies is how we think, so were we to change, we would actually need to go into a little bit of a losing of one's language in order to regain it. And there are developmental stages that follow what prior to that needs to be regression stages. So we have this place in Palawan. It's called Maya. It's an eco village, and it's a place that innerdance will build. And the amount of weirdness this place has seen is beyond phenomenal. You can imagine, like, this is a place where innerdance lives. So the local villagers have been exposed to some of the strangest things seeable en masse, big groups of people, 30, 50 at a time, going extremely weird on each other, different colored skin, like there was no tomorrow and there was no yesterday. There are some who stay a longer time, and those who do, they really start to exhibit what it's like to really regress. To regress is to go back to the origins, to go back to and like we're such a progress driven world, so we don't really like the idea of regression. When people go into retreats, even long ones, there's somehow this guilt when you're not doing anything, when there's always like this need to go forward, to evolve, to progress. Like I need to keep doing something. So based on my example of having lived in the island and not doing anything for 2 years, it's like less is more. When I didn't do anything, I left it alone. And when I left it alone, it seems like the body has this internal mechanism where it can fix itself. And right now we're trying to fix too much so that it's not in a space of allowance. The autonomic nervous system is automatic. It knows what to do. And the journeys we're going into, something's doing itself, right? So wait, I'm trying to trace my thoughts. So regression is a big topic. Like it doesn't sound so good, but let's say stating the simple insight, the resonant, vibrant one insight that would hold this. What is it like to become a child again? Do we remember what the world looked like when we were there? Maybe 1 year old, 2 years old. What was the world like before language acquisition? Because if you were to use the word development, stages of development. These are terminologies primarily used by the developmental psychologists, the people who are experts in understanding the mind that had to transition from the absolute, the baby state, into structure, into personality, into language. So what mediates stages of development is called the language acquisition device, where you start to absorb the meanings. And the words aren't really just words, they hold the structure. It's like a whole library situates you in your mind so that a word is connected to all these other concepts and ideas and words that are very, very stable. So the insight here has something to do with, is it okay to destroy, if not destroy, reorganize that library? And I think where you're coming from, Cindy, is there is a transition. It's an awkward moment, an uncomfortable moment, to interrelate this with where Tom and Candice were coming from. That point in which magnetism decreases, there is going to be a scary moment almost. And the deeper moments cannot be relied upon externally. You will be alone in some of those moments. There will be no teachers, there will be no healers, there will be no guides. There can be support mechanisms, mirroring, seeing process, to be seen within that space. But that's those are the points. The 0 point are the points in which you need to parent yourself. You need to birth yourself from the ground up. And I think we would allow that to happen if we understood why we have to go there. What is there in that 0 point space, the regressive space? So in the next months, we will talk about the child mind. The in innerdance, the terminology we use is aphasia. There's a point in which sometimes people lose their language and become like babies. They literally sometimes become like babies. That can happen in an hour. Sometimes that can happen in a week. Sometimes that can happen in a month or a year. We're uncomfortable when we think about that, but to reconceptualize the baby as not something stupid. If the baby was wise, the baby doesn't always have the linguistic capacity to express meanings, because words really are kind of limiting. We will not cancel out words. We will experience language where words can still be used but can hold more interdimensionality. So I think we're needing permission to go back. In the inner dance or in this energy, it's already happening. Even if you didn't understand what it was, if you facilitate it, you will keep hearing people say, I went back to the womb. I went back to the beginning, I went back to the origins, I went back to source. What does that actually mean? But it's plenty. But this energy is almost designed to do that, to bring us back to the source, to the origins, to the womb. So I loved your sharing, because many people understand inner dance simply for the letting go, or the energy, the kundalini thing. They see it as more, okay, it's for the awakening, it's for the letting go, it's for the shattering of old patterns and so on and so forth. But what is not always visible is, it could be contained in one word. It's called growth. So if you have the power to go back to source, doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it the universe, you can call it energy. Now that you became that, this nonlinear vast space, you could call it source. How would the source grow? There would then need to be slow stages of development. And there's actually a lot in developmental psychology that you can learn. I personally love that, because when I was facilitating inner dance at the height of my work, when I was holding so many bodies, I I had a kid, I had a child, and so now my son is 12 and my daughter is 7. So at the height of me holding these adult bodies that were becoming like babies again, like becoming pure, going back to the beginning, I think is another way of putting it. It's like everything's so messed up, it's so chaotic. I don't have a starting point. Can I just go back to the beginning again? Is that not possibly what people are looking for, are asking for? So if we can do that, we actually need to take them slowly back to earth. So if we were to be honest with this, there are opportunities and beautiful things in the regression. There are also challenges and dangers. There are imbalances. There are problems in the spiritual awakening that also needs to be talked about and not bypassed. It needs to be understood. There's egocentrism, there's avoidance, there's addictions happening, and we're all guilty. It's embedded there. It's there. You almost need to become the center of the universe, which is what a toddler has. A toddler is the center of the universe. A toddler is the heart of the earth. So when ego comes up, it is still spiritual ego, and there's something beautiful in that. But if it's not understood through the stages of development, it could just become ego as ego. So yeah, so much of what we have to share with you, what innerdance is, it's like a framework on regression and development. So I think you're sharing, your very words are very salient. It's very exact. It's very appropriate for this. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Anyone else would like to? We could give maybe 20 more minutes and then we're at the 3-hour mark.
Hey,
Yes.
everyone, how are you?
This is Maite.
And Maite, when you're talking about, the heart and the breath and the brain and the rhythm, harmony, melody, tempo, like so many and more stuff going on. And so many things that we can use to induce the space in some way. It doesn't matter what is going to be the effect, but hopefully will bring people to some places. How do we create the space between our own intention using all of this versus just leaving the energy doing the work? How do we work with the energy? How do we become a co-creator with it, but not becoming too much from our ego?
Okay. All right. So let's start first with why and how innerdance. Like, what is the point in laying down and surrendering to begin with? There are different possible levels of that. Like a lot of people, they attend a session where someone is holding the space. What is amazing in innerintensive is when people lay down by themselves. That's a whole different level altogether, where people are becoming their own healers and their own teachers. So not to discredit the group session, why would we still do that if it was actually possible to lay down on your own? The reason has something to do still with fear and trust. Life is hard and suffering is real for many who are in a place of very huge stress. And we're coming from love and empathy, and we would like to support. Knowing that trust is the key. Very often when people are, when they've experienced, just so much experiences of manipulation and not being supported, not being loved unconditionally, being driven too much by external opinions and forces, it's very hard to trust in that way. They can't trust themselves, they can't trust others, they can't trust everything. And you can see it in their language, you can feel it in the way they hold their minds. So one of the gifts the group session gives is at least they can surrender to someone. If they cannot surrender to themselves, if they cannot surrender to God, the goddess, they can't surrender to the day, you are at least giving them an opportunity where that choice could become very apparent. As soon as they decide to go into a process, already the trust possibility is there. You know, on the body, mental, spiritual, and energetic level. So the goal of the space holder is not so much to hold a space. It's to be the space that allows for the space. They're there so that as people trust them, so can they trust themselves. So a facilitator needs to be very careful that that transition takes place. It cannot just be that, okay, I want to be trusted, I want to be trustworthy, I want people to come to me. No, you need to create the bridge. There needs to be a transition where it's really about the person. It's not about the guru, it's not about the teacher, the healer. So when that happens, you've already given one of the greatest gifts you can give to another person, which is independence. You're not creating a dependency. You're not creating a system where I need people to keep coming to my workshops so that I could pay for the rent. So obviously the greater work will happen outside of the healing space. Having said that, very few people are able to go as deep as they can go alone. And if we already are experiencing the possible tools, the possible effects. So let's say the reason why we're using music is because we understand the importance of vibration, vibratory language. If you know vibration, would you just sit down to a person and speak to them using words? There has to be something somatic, autonomic, there has to be something tactile. Something needs to speak to the body right now. It's urgent. Something needs to speak to people's body wisdom. The body is the earth, the body is the universe. The body that's holding deep memory. You can almost imagine from what Candace just last wrote, there's memory there, there's something in the fetus, there's something in the embryo that's passed on, that's in remembrance. And then we almost have to lose that when we grow up. So in psychology, there's always the differentiation between the internal and the external. It's either you have a weak or strong internal or external locus of control. There's also a social, historical, or a constructivist view whereby are you a product of your own making or are you a product of your own society? Nature versus nurture, right? Are you a victim of your family structure or are you an autonomous, strong individual person who creates your own life? The second seems to be more tempting. Of course, I want to say I'm creating my own reality, but having left that to its own, the individualist mind is responsible for the global problems that are happening right now. The egoism, consumerism. So part of the going back process is in fact reactivation of what's called the collective consciousness. There's so much romanticization for the term the ego death. So a lot of people, they go into ego death. Okay, my ego is dying. I'm losing my personal structure. But if something dies, something needs to replace it. So for someone like you, Maite, who lives in America, but actually comes from a South American space. You have both. Those in the global South are coming from a collective consciousness space, and a lot of people are coming from the North or the Western hemispheres of the world. They're coming from a very self-based system. And what's interesting now is those from the global South and the East are now experimenting with what it means to have an ego. You look at the Chinese, the Indians. Identity suddenly becomes more important for those who lived in tribal and traditional societies. And then Western societies are now really interested in what it means to come into the collective. So that's why something like inner dance becomes so powerful, because it's bringing about both an ego death and the birthing of the collective at the same time. To get that to happen, we do need to be very careful in how we language things so that we're not just activating personal motivations. Like, oh, okay, this energy is gonna give you what you want. What do you want? You want $1 million? You want a big house? You want to get married to Brad Pitt? Inner dance or energy yourself enough, and you'll get there. That's where we lose the whole point, because this energy comes from letting go of almost everything we thought to be real, to be open to a reality that is being downloaded, that is incoming, that is something not quite like anything we've seen before. We need to be so vulnerable in how you becoming strong, become a parent holding structure. You need to take care of your own baby. Like you were a baby. You have to hold yourself as if you were a baby, but you have to be strong as if you were a god or a goddess that is coming from an all-knowing. Everything is known. And then the ego says, I don't know anything. Those two need to be in a conversation with each other. So to be able to hold that brain, breath, and blood system requires really like that an independence happens. And so not just to relate on autonomic nervous system elements like inner dance, then our yoga is actually still key. Our breath work, our exercise, where does discipline come in? You can't just go into the feminine in this way. Don't just let go. Don't just be like water. You also need fire. You need to take the insight and to activate, to embody it somehow, so it's not just a thought or a passing image. Something that happens in spiritual communities is people start to depend too much on signs. Say, oh, I'll make a decision when I receive the signs. That's what it means to have a very weak internal locus of control. It's like the world will take care of me. The facilitator will take care of me. So what your question or sharing, it's more of a sharing really. It's not a question. It's stating my idea. Is like where does the other come in? But when we're talking about inner dance, we will isolate inner dance is what it is. It's having brought up the autonomic nervous system, understanding why we need to learn how to react, which is to react or to act again, which could be positive too, not just to create a cycle of action that's coming from pain, but to react in a way that's from unity, from the unitive, from oneness, not just from pain and separation, to develop habitus, new habits, even new addictions. Being addicted to light, at least, is a better addiction than being addicted to meth and to cocaine and to pain. Will be a way to set about a new lifestyle that right now is still kind of confined in the yoga mat. To make it a lived experience. I think you will not stop until you, and I honestly believe this, you will not stop until you create a paradise. And that means making the energy functional. at that point, you will not need the spiritual practice anymore. You're there. You made it. You created the Garden of Eden and the Elysian Fields in Shambhala. And that could be in an apartment. That could be in an eco-village. It doesn't matter. You're just there, and people say, "What do you need right now?" And it's like, I'm okay. I'm happy. That's when it's functional, right? But internally, you've altered the conditions of the earth so that no matter what's happening outside, like Gandhi, you could be stuck in a prison, and you're holding the space from the mechanisms that embody joy, oneness forever, and infinity in a very simple human way. Thank you. Hope that illuminates. Maybe one more, if any. It's almost 5 o'clock here. Thank you so much.
I'll go. I have a question regarding again how the inner dance waves go out as we speak. I noticed that in person it can shift a person like in the room, but I also noticed that over time and space, we can do inner dancing through dialogues. So I was wondering if we can have more context on how that works.
Okay. Yeah, I think if vibration is there, it would happen. I would initially ask people to dive into holding the energy space as they could, as they develop this new way of listening and speaking. For me, inner dance language is simple. When you learn to speak only as you're listening, then you're there. I feel a lot of miscommunication happens because people are speaking only as them and they're not listening as like them. So when we're coming from them, even as we're speaking, there's resonance. There cannot be any dissonance there. To get there, we want to get interested in other ways of languaging. And so I find music to be so exciting because when you learn to speak vibration or sound, I've seen people go into aphasia a lot. Aphasia means you lose your ability to express from your ego and you're starting to be like a baby. You can't really speak the motivations the ego used to have. So that takes a break and then people are quiet or they go into light language. And then I've seen them grow as amazing beings by finding the right songs before they find the right words, finding the right tonalities before they find the right words, finding the right gestures before they find the right words. Just like a baby might slowly come into the world and move around almost clumsily, trying to get used to the new body. I think to dive into the chance to hold an energy space to people is interesting in that way. I'm not always pushing people into holding energetic space when I feel, okay, people just want to go into it because they want to feel the power. They want to do it for, like just business, and all those could be okay, but there are other possible reasons why we go into this space. And from like a growth or stages of development idea, a lot of people actually hold the space because the energy can grow. The energy wants to speak to the energy, where the message is actually the energy itself. So from a social historical point of view of language, which is the point of view where I am being shaped by the outside just as much as I'm constructing it from inside, you can heal yourself, but true healing happens when you also heal what's around you, because what is around you is a reflection of what is inside you. So you develop an opening of the pineal gland, and then there's like a witness, so that when you're looking at someone, you almost feel like you're watching them and you're not controlling anything anymore. You actually feel like you are creating this reality just as much as they are creating you. I mean, that sort of conversation is just like it, right? It's like, oh, we are taking absolute responsibility. There is no blame, there is no shame, there is no guilting happening here. Everything's happening for a reason. Everything's always evolving. This is a conversation with the one. I do find it interesting that when we go through the stages, there is a very deep awareness that the only reason why you're actually saying it is because there's something inside you speaking to itself. It could be with your mom, it could be with a baby, with your neighbor, with your doctor. The only reason why you're actually speaking is because you're speaking to yourself. So there's a paradox in what I've said earlier, where it's about the other. It, it, it's consciousness wanting to speak to itself. And so to come into absolute responsibility, I think requires a contextualization. And you can feel it, right? When you enter a room and then there's like a blame system that is being, it doesn't need to be visible, but when people are projecting, you can tell that people aren't about to take responsibility. So one thing you need to take care of when you open the space, if you're going to open the space, you don't need to verbalize this. It could be an energy, it could be a resonance. Make people take responsibility. Because if then people start to blame or project, they will say, oh, wow, I experienced all this yuckiness because there was someone in the room who was screaming and I absorbed it, or there were entities, or you can feel that in your body, what it feels like when someone is trying to not own inevitably everything is inside. It could be everything from Hitler to aliens to Santa Claus. All of these are archetypes within a simulatory holographic field you call the body. So to establish safety for them and for you, it's really important that everything be owned. It's up to you how you creatively do that. That don't this is not the space where you externalize that it will be the nature spirits that come and heal you. It will be the entities that come and heal you. It will be the gods and goddesses that come down from the sky and heal you. No, we are, as a species, coming into a dimensional awareness of reality where everything is a holographic oneness. There's only one person. There's only one day. There's only one room, pretending there's many. And dimensionally, we're remembering we're all one. Nothing was separate. Nothing is separate. There's no separation. So to amazingly experience that in a conversation, I think I'm self-correcting myself. There's a way to hold a belief structure. It's not just about the words. How do you understand the psychology of the mind of others and yourself, where something's still separating, where I'm not you and you're not me, and this room is separate from all the other rooms. The inner dance is amazing because we do go into the actual experience of what it means, where there's only one space, there's only one person, there's only one day, pretending there's many. And in fact, the more we do it, we would start to realize, how are we doing that? What is the structure? How are we actually doing that? These are the stuff of metacognition. It's like consciousness becoming conscious of itself. So the pain in the beginning, the discomfort in a lot of conversations is going into a place where the ego would rest, would get out of the way, would just, okay, go shopping, go somewhere. Don't interfere with what's happening. So it's like a playlist, right? It's like something needs to go up and then release and then go down, and then something needs to rise up. So when we develop the ability to hold the insight, I think the insight is the core heart. So when we're in conversations, like, what's the point? That requires a certain, state, and to just live out the energy, not to do it, but to be it, not to just need a playlist, but to be the playlist, to be the playlist of all the oscillations, the waves, the fast and the slow happening at the same time. I often felt when I was holding the space, the group, what I was doing is, which is kind of insane, to be able to hold the space, you need to be able to kill and to nurture, to allow for the death and the birth to happen at the same time. That's the true healing, to allow something to descend. Okay, okay, goodbye, thank you, you were great, but yeah, I don't need this anymore. And then to say, okay, hello, great, like, nice to know you. To be able to language things in a way that something would die, you're literally like Mother Kali, killing them, and then you're Shakti, you're loving them, nurturing them. That's what we're doing. You're not just people pleasing. You're not just creating an addiction, creating a bliss, and then hiding the dirt, pushing away. No, it's like you're speaking to the fear. And normally when you do that, that's when the fear goes. And then you're speaking to the highest, speaking directly to the fear, and yet speaking to the highest potential in language, in clarity. That is what brings transformation about. I come from a culture that doesn't like speaking to the fear or the highest. So for me to even be able to put this into words, to quite a galumph, or whatever word to describe this impossible situation where, yeah, so thank you. It's a beautiful question.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's exactly 5 here, or exactly 3 hours. So let's keep the conversation going. It's quite a big first call. Could send this out. We can go deeper into things later. When we make shifts in the music, it has a lot to do with what I presented in the playlist. And in the old ways we were doing innerdance, we would shift between songs. It's to activate the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So I'm hoping that you at least are able to have a starting point, a structural starting point, and then this dialogue that we had at least brings things into essence. Speak your truth in the group space, the channels. It's been overwhelmingly amazing to read and listen to what people are going through, even just for a week. It's just been a week, and where people are at, it normally takes months for people to get there. I think it's the world. I think there's something very prime, very ripe in the world right now, and you don't even need to plant seeds. You don't need to toil to sow the land. We're here to harvest. You don't have to work. I think a lot of the work has been done. Now is the time to just receive the blessings. I think that's why it's happening so fast and so huge right now. I'm almost kind of overwhelmed, but at the same time, I'm just here. So yeah, thank you. So if you could unmute and just help me close the space. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Pai.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.